Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar series. I'm Nihal Al-Busaidi, and I'm a part of the MENA speakers team. Now, we're going to kickstart today with a new webinar series titled Women Who Inspire. So this series is basically an initiative by leading speakers and MCs Bureau in the region. And part of the MENA speakers role is basically to increase, or let's say expand, the presence of female speakers in events around in the world. So today, I'd like to mention that the reason why we are hosting these events around this month, this particular month, is because it is closer to the 28th of August, which is Emirati Women's Day. Now, these 1 hour free webinar, and they're very powerfully conducted by these amazing women, are going to be targeted at various audiences covering different types of topics. Now, today our speaker goes by the name of Aya Sadr, and she is going to be talking about the new role of customer service, the lifeblood of leading organizations. Now, before I can let Aya begin, I'd like to mention that there is going to be a Q&A session at the very end, where you can drop down your questions in the little Q&A tab below. And you also have the option of engaging with our speaker, and you can do that through the chat box, and she can interact with you, and you can interact back. Now, without further ado, please help me welcome Aya Sadr. Welcome, Aya.
Nihal. All right, great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Nihal, for the wonderful introduction. It's an honor to kick off the series with MENA speakers for this month. Am I ready to share the screen, Nihal? Can I begin?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, just give me one moment. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, and that's full screen. All right, wonderful. So thank you so much again, Nihal, for the introduction. It really is truly an honor to be a part of the speaker series representing these amazing women for Emirati Women's Day. And I'm absolutely in love and intrigued by the name. And I think many people who are listening in today are by Women Who Inspire. It is also an honor to be a part of this category. So thank you very much again to Sana, Ifi, Nihal, and the entire team for pushing the series forward. So as Nihal had mentioned, the topic that I've selected for today is the new rules of customer service, which is in my perspective, lifeblood of leading organizations. It is the most important and critical thing for us to really pay attention to. So a little bit about me and why I will be expressing this topic. I grew up here in the UAE. I completed my high school degree, and then I completed my bachelor's degree in Boston in a small entrepreneurship school called Babson College, where I graduated with a strategic management and economics degree from that university. A lot of what we really concentrated on as well, and what I made my minor was marketing. So I think a lot of the points around customer service were very important for us to learn from, and they were really subjects that, it was really a subject that I got really interested in while I was there. One of our classes, which I took in marketing called brand management, they required us to basically give an example of great customer service. Having grown up in the UAE, something that I presented forward was the UAE as a country that gave great customer service. So I think a lot of us can agree that in this time of crisis, if we take a look at what's happening in Lebanon, for example, the situation in terms of people returning back to the UAE, they were welcomed at the airport with roses by the staff there. This was extremely moving, not just as a Lebanese person, but also for the entire world to see that the UAE embraces all cultures, nationalities, backgrounds, and really gives the best service to everybody and anybody who's coming, transiting for a few hours, who is stopping over for a few days, or is even moving to the UAE. So I think what we can really talk about when it comes to customer service is this relates not just to companies, but this can also relate to countries. I think if we look deeper into the economic situation globally, we would really see that the UAE is ranked one of the highest in terms of customer service in the world. So without further ado, I'd like to start the main presentation to describe how other companies are also doing this. So a very famous quote by Tony Hsieh, who's quite well known, he mentioned that customer service shouldn't just be a department. It should be the entire company. Now, what we can really learn from this statement can be applied back to many corporations and many startups is when you're defining your mission statement, I would even suggest including customer service within it. So a lot of companies don't understand how important this aspect is for your company, and I will explain throughout the presentation why it truly is. But I really believe that putting the customer first before anything else is the most critical way to succeed and also to be able to have a sustainable future for your business. So for those companies that don't have customer service in their mission statement today, I would even encourage them to do so, because it really is powerful to kind of rebrand and reposition your company in a way where your customers are benefiting the most, so they give you back the most as well. A company I wanted to give as a reference to describe how they have put customer service forward is Clinique. Clinique is a brand that is owned by Estée Lauder companies. And in my perspective, even not just as Clinique, but as Estée Lauder companies, the ethos of the brand really talks about the customer being first. So when we talk about high touch simply being the touch of a hand, which Estée Lauder at a very early date in her career really described how when a woman sits down at her counter, she leans over and she touches her hand. And that embrace, that moment when you have a physical touch, a moment with a customer, it really is about driving up the emotion. So what you're doing is creating empathy between yourself and them, which in return, that positive energy, that serotonin that this customer is also releasing, is that ability for them to feel the vibe of the place and would encourage them to not just buy one item, but perhaps even several. Now, a brand like Clinique, and why I'm referencing this brand in specific under Estée Lauder companies, they don't believe that the hierarchy within the company is a triangle like this. So usually we have the top management sitting at the top, and then you have the mid-management, and then you have the frontline staff at the bottom. At Clinique, what they believe in is flipping that triangle. So it's really about having the frontline, the staff who are basically the ones in front of the customer all the time. They're the ones who are giving back to the entire organization. So I think there's really an important model here, which a lot of other companies can learn from, which is that your most important person in the company is the one who is serving the customer directly. So think about anything where you have retail staff that have a moment to speak to the customer, even if it's a supermarket and they're checking out an item. I think all of these moments are so important for us to embrace, that sometimes it's not just about a quick checkout, but it also is about giving and exerting a positive emotion to your customer. Now, what does your customer service truly depend on as a company? So two things here that I would definitely put on the table. One of them being your business model, and the second one being the available resources. Now, when we talk about the business model, and this is something that when in business we would call the lifetime value, but also when we talk about customer service in specific, we talk about the customer lifetime value. So how can we actually get this customer to be a repeat customer? So a quick example of this would be a person coming into a Starbucks, for example. They purchase a venti Americano. So let's say it's around 19 dirhams. If this customer has a bad experience, then that 19 dirhams will probably be the last 19 dirhams you will ever get from this customer. So what we really need to think about is how do we create an overall experience where that person who's coming into that store, right, moves from being a person who would come in once to becoming a regular customer. So how do we really embed that within the culture? And I think we can all agree that the ethos of the brand and the comfort of the brand and the customer centricity of this brand proves that the customer lifetime value of a Starbucks customer is not just a one-time venti Americano. It's going to be a lifetime of different choices, and it's going to be a lifetime of different, I would say, transactions. The second one I would say is the available resources. Now, let's use the Starbucks example once again. You have a customer who walks into your place, right? So the first thing that happens is he or she is greeted by the person who's behind the counter. That person is a resource for Starbucks, and that resource is basically going to be the front line speaking to the customer. So there's a lot of different tricks and a lot of different ways that barista is really going to be able to cater to that customer coming in. But if we just analyze that moment when that person walks in, it's really important for us to, I would say, create a narrative of how the barista is going to be speaking to the customer. And again, I think that's something that Starbucks has really thought in, day out, on how to maximize the return on each customer. So those are two things that I would say, definitely, if you can apply them to your own companies, try and think about your business model, try and think about your available resources that you can apply to get the best results. And if you have any questions related to your own companies, I'd love to see them at the end. The next point that I would definitely say is, when we talk about customer service today, right, we should also be thinking pragmatically towards the future. So if we take an example of the robot that walks around and reminds you to put on your mask, it actually is, funny enough, although it is a robot, it looks quite friendly. So I think a lot of us can agree that it does. So it's, sometimes it's about maximizing our ability to reach our customer in a way where it's relevant and it's important, and also it's futuristic in the way that it's done. So really embracing technology to support us on this. The second one on the right-hand side, I would say, is this is an example by IDEMIA, which is a biometrics that allows for face scanning to help and support the person who is actually looking at the passport at the airport. So I think what we can really take from both examples here is the ability for us to create a more seamless experience using technology and simultaneously using customer service to get the most benefit. So this is something that we can really take away from both examples. Now, this is a quick snapshot that I took from MIT, from one of their business reviews. They mentioned that the future of customer service is AI human collaboration, right? So now what does this really mean? So if we take the example of the lady on the right-hand side in the image, in the slide before, she's standing in front of the biometrics. And that's what's taking a picture of her. It's guaranteeing the safety of the airport, is guaranteeing the security of the personnel, and it's also guaranteeing that we have the right person standing in front of the controller. So what we really need to make sure of as well is to not assume that what's happening in the future in terms of customer service is going to be removing the person entirely. It's about creating that collaboration point where we can each maximize what we can do, not just as human beings, but also benefiting from what robotics, from AI, and other methods in terms of technology can really support us with as people. So that's something in terms of how the future will be. So now I'd like to get you all warm, because I think I've been talking for a few minutes now. I'd love to know from the audience, which stage is your business in? So I think I'm going to actually exit for a second so that I can see. I don't know if I can actually see some of the points. If you're with me, can you let me know how I can see the chat?
It's down there on the chat option.
Okay.
You see the chat option?
No, I don't. Oh, here? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
This one? Yes. Okay, wonderful. I still think I'm on the wrong one. I wanted to kind of get the, yes, maybe Q&A? No, more?
The Q&A. No one has sent, there is the Q&A option above as well. You'll see it.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to get some answers from the audience in terms of knowing, what stage of your business are you in? So are you idea stage? Are you working for an SME, an SMB, or are you working for a corporate? So I'd love to know from the audience. Yes, okay, so I see a chat. So if he works with an SME, I think he's the only one who's responding to my question. Okay, wonderful. Floyd and Ons. So Floyd works with an SME, Ons works for an idea stage company. Siraj works for an SME. Okay, wonderful. So thank you guys for participating with me. Super important for us to keep this an ongoing conversation. So wonderful. So we have entrepreneurs, SMEs, idea stage. Now, why am I asking this question? And I think it's super important for us to remember. At the end of the day, regardless of the size of your company, you have to have customer service there, right? So this is the most important part. Now, I think in a few slides, I'll talk a little bit about Mudassir and how he talks about customer service. But customer service, to become great at customer service, he mentioned that he spent the first 2 years of his company being involved in every single aspect of Careem. So he never, took a step back. He really was involved to the point where he could understand how each and every single division could function to the best of its ability, and he would understand the ins and outs. So I think when we talk about customer service, it's also for the entrepreneurs in the room really being customer obsessed and really being able to, I would say, get out there in front of every aspect of where your customer would be at a touch point with your business. So when we talk a little bit as well around, where does your customer expect you to be? So according to this tweet by HubSpot, 85% of customers expect the conversation to move seamlessly across channels and hate repeating themselves. Now, I think this is quite interesting because at the end of the day, if you have one customer that is trying to dial in or trying to send an email or trying to understand what is happening with, let's say, their situation, I'm sure if we take Emirates Airline as an example here, when obviously a lot of flights were getting canceled, a lot of people were expecting refunds, a lot of what was happening is the customer is trying to dial in, right? Simultaneously, they're trying to email to understand what is happening. Now, the frustration will come from the idea that this customer, every time they're kind of trying to contact the airline, would feel that their ticket is being neglected. So when we talk about customer service across that value chain, it's really about having that reference code, which Emirates always asks you when they have your booking, what is your reference code? Because then they can actually table every single point to your ticket, to your reference number, to be able to evaluate what has happened in the past so that you feel that every single time you've called in, it has not been a waste of your time. So these are little details that are super critical when it comes to your customer, always making them feel that they're not being, that they are being attended to and they're not being neglected. So that's something I would definitely say in terms of, how an example of how an airline would do it. Now, in terms of your businesses, so for the entrepreneurs, SMEs in the room, I think this is a very important thing for you to take away. One, if you are going to be trying to understand where to be available. So should you have, for example, should we have a software like a Zendesk on our front end? Should we be on Facebook? Should we have a Facebook bot? Should we be on Instagram? Should we have our Instagram page? Where should it reroute to? Can we, also create, so et cetera, right? So you really want to try and understand that. There's 2 ways that you can do this. The first one is through research. Try and understand what your competition is doing to start with, right? So if you, for example, are, you're setting up an events company. Take an example of the UAE. So there's a company here called Polka Dots and Ribbons. And they help set up events for weddings and for kids, for many different types of themes. The first thing that I would encourage you to do is to look at a successful company and try and understand where are they right now. Because your first question would be, should we be everywhere? Should we be on Facebook and Instagram and many other channels? But you have to ask yourself the question, what did the competition do and what can we learn from let's say, the mistakes that they had made? Why did they, let's say, move away from the Facebook and only are on Instagram? There's many questions here that you need to understand because that's where you're going to be dedicating a resource, which is going to cost you money. As we mentioned in the beginning, your available resources at the end of the day, you need to make sure that they have a unit of measure. You have to make sure that they're engaged and that they're producing something. So that money that you're spending on that person to attend to those things, you want to make sure is the best return on your investment. So these are just, a few different points in terms of the research. The second one would be, I would definitely encourage a lot of people here, is the user journey, right? So trying to do a user experience exercise to figure out, just by talking to your users, where would they expect you to be? So this is something that I would really encourage most of us here today, and to never discount and to continuously do, try and find out where your customers are so that you would be able to be there for them. So when we talk a little bit about customer service as well, what I try to do for everyone here is, try to understand what is the point of the customer service person. So assuming that this person is sitting on the back end, are we using the right customer service skill? And this skill we can talk about can translate into language. It can translate into, do they have the technical expertise to answer certain questions that our customers are asking us? So there's a lot of different criteria that we need to evaluate before hiring the right person to do it. And also capacity. So how many people should we take, in considering the fact that we know that, we've estimated how many calls will be coming in or how many messages will be sent, and continuously improving the more that we learn. The second one would be reviewing practices. The third one, working on impressions. The fourth, working on service requests. And then self-service. I just wonder if you can all see my screen. And then the last one is ability to organize your work. So I think in each of these situations, you really want to understand what's the scope of your customer service so that you're really adding the most benefit back to your customers. Okay, great. So this is one of, I would say, a very important example and my personal favorite. I've shared with Iffy that, and he'll share it with everybody here. There is a really good podcast that was recently put on WAMDA, and it was done with Mudassir Sheikha, who obviously, for those who are listening and probably already know, is the CEO of Careem. And he really describes why customer service was a super important element for him and how he learned from a lot of the things that Uber were doing wrong and how he corrected them so that he would have a competitive advantage in the market. And years later, here we go. We have an exit and a unicorn, one of the most successful companies in the MENA region. So if we take an example of what happened with Mudassir, he mentions three very important things that happened. The first one is while analyzing Uber, he realized that there are not enough people who have credit cards registered on the app. So they're having a difficult time actually going from point A to point B. For a lot of you who grew up in Dubai with the yellow taxis, we know that we are always able to give cash. So the first thing he said was, I'm going to make cash available so people can actually pay with cash without having to put in their credit cards. The second thing that he mentioned was there is no way for corporates like McKinsey and others to have a B2B account with Uber. This simply does not exist today. So what he did is he said, okay, let's also open up B2B accounts. So he hired, of course, at the beginning, he was also working personally on calling McKinsey and all the other corporates to sign them on creating these B2B accounts. So what he basically did is he created a B2B strategy for Careem as another differentiating point. The third thing that he did, which was very, very smart, is he realized that it's a two-way equation. The frontliners are the drivers. So what he did is he rebranded the entire idea of a driver into a captain. Now, why is this important? Because what Careem was able to do really quickly was to focus on just three priorities, three simple features that was able to get him from point A to point B, from being just a startup to being one of the most successful exits in the region. So I think what we can really learn from Mudassir in this case is how can we simplify the problem as much as possible? And how can we be so specific in terms of understanding every single touch point? By prioritizing the customer service element, by putting the frontliners, right? So the Careem cars always are clean, they always smell good, he always has a charger available for you. He's always making sure that, the star rating is really symbolic of how you're treated when you come into the car. By really explaining and pushing that narrative in terms of their marketing, in terms of their brand voice, we were able to see Careem become one of the most successful companies in the world. So that's one huge thing. And then I think if you will share with you the resources at the end with the WAMDA podcast, so you can listen into it. It's worth every minute. Oops, sorry. Great. And then now this is another point that I'd love to bring to your attention, and I'll complement it with an example. Having graduated from Babson and having taken a course in brand management, as I mentioned earlier, there was a very important course called, there was a very important chapter within the course called ZMOT. ZMOT stands for Zero Moment of Truth. And at the end as well, if he shares the resources, he will also share, it's basically a PDF. It's not too long, but it's one of the best reads I've had from any marketing course that I've ever taken. And it really describes why this is important and how to do it properly for your company. Now, I'm going to give you an example of, let's take the example of Rotana, right? So Rotana hotels, the first thing that you're thinking of is, I as a customer would like to go stay at a hotel somewhere, right? So the first thing you do is you get onto you want to go on a vacation. That's your stimulus. The first thing that you're going to do is the ZMOT. So you're going to go online, you're going to either talk to people, you're going to check Instagram, you're going to go on Facebook, you're going to look at blogs, and you're going to try and find out which is the best hotel to go to. What you do then, after you decide based on the reviews, which you check diligently. So for example, if somebody says Rotana in Dubai has a beautiful swimming pool and is very family friendly, and let's say you have 2 kids and you're wondering where would be the best place to go to, that would be a great and ideal fit for you. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to then book, and then you're going to want to go visit the hotel, obviously. Now, if you can't get to the booking process, which is your first moment of truth, fast enough, that person is 1 click away from clicking on another platform or booking at another place. So I think the first thing you need to also understand is how fast can you check out your customer and how can you make them feel while checking out for their booking. So is there messaging there that says, for example, booking is refundable? Especially in a time like COVID, a lot of people are worried that if they're going to book, that they're not going to get their money back, or they're going to tell them that you have a voucher for 48 months, which is, it sounds cool, but at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, am I ever going to go to this place? So before you really, before you get your customer kind of stuck in, try and make yourself, put yourself in the shoes of the customer to see what would be something that would encourage them to click. So the second thing that I would say is, now they've gone to the hotel. How was the greeting at the hotel? Did the person welcome them with open arms? Was it a respectful gesture? Did they offer them a free drink when they came in? What were the elements that really embraced their time at the place? So once, let's say, this person is checking out, we go back to the 0 moments of truth. And that 0 moments of truth, and I think a lot of us here today have to understand this, is going to happen to you whether you're working for yourself, you're working for an SME, you're working for a big corporate. People are going to be posting and sharing online their experiences. So what you really want to make sure of, as a hotel, for example, as a Rotana, that your narrative, your dialogue that you're expressing online is really in check with what you want people to read, because that's a motivating factor for them to either book or not book with you. So I'll give you a great example of a startup that actually has helped on the 0 moment of truth. They were a graduate from one of the earlier cohorts of Untitled Incubator, which is an aviation, travel, and tourism incubator that's based in Dubai. I used to work with them. They're a startup called Hotel Data Cloud, and what they basically do is they make sure that all of the, let's say, the dialogue or the narrative that you're reading about each of these hotels is curated by them. So what they do is they go on the back end and they make sure that everything that you type in when it comes to Rotana is exactly on Google what they want their customers to hear, not what customers want each other to hear. So they really help clean up a lot of the dialogue around certain things that people have posted, so that they can try and accurately depict what they want their customers to know about them as well. This also helps in terms of saying, for example, if you, let's say you're Rotana, you just built a gorgeous gym and that has not been published on your website because you didn't focus on that aspect, you didn't market it properly, Hotel Data Cloud would make sure that that is done correctly and that you're always up to date with your customer. So most importantly, the 0 moments of truth goes back to every single business that now exists. Everybody is searching online and they're always going to be reading things about your business. So make sure that what you have available for people to read looks good on you. All right, let's get to the next stage. I want to give a few examples here of when we mentioned 0 moment of truth. These are some great examples of what they want their customer to hear. Now, if we start with this Starbucks example on the far left, right? So it says, Brendan, sorry if I spelled your name wrong. This is a stressful job, but I tried my best, right? So that's a very sweet message from a barista who's basically saying and admitting that, yes, I want you to feel delighted by the fact that I'm going to write your name on here. But if I've written it wrong, then I'm really sorry. That type of empathy that she or he has built with the customer is really beautiful, because that customer feels appreciated. They feel like somebody has spoken to them and spoken to them in a very sweet and loving way. So try and think of yourself as a brand. Are you always communicating with your customer in a way where they feel appreciated? That's something that I would definitely encourage everybody here to think about when it comes to their brand. How do you want to speak? What's going to be your brand of voice when talking to your customer? Now, a beautiful example of a company that I'm going to mention next is Unas, who wants their customer to feel a certain way and to understand why they are different from the competition. So here's a moment of customer service where nobody had to speak a single word to the customer, but they just mentioned something that they know is super important to them. 2-hour delivery time. Now, why is this important? Because when they were researching the user, trying to understand what the customer wants, they want speed, right? So apart from the fact that they have one of the best customer services, I would say customer service I've ever seen or ever experienced, something that they really want to do is highlight as well, what is that thing that differentiates them? And they do it right when you land on the app. That's extremely powerful because they know exactly that this is going to win the customer over every single time. And as a unit of measure in terms of customer service as well for them, this is something that they measure quite diligently. It's what guarantees them more customers. And most importantly, customer lifetime value is always higher because they meet the customer's needs in terms of delivering on that experience time and time again. And if they don't, they apologize, they give you back a credit, they try and do better next time, they communicate all the way through with you from point A to point Z. And then finally, the last example that I say was quite wonderful that I felt I had to add in the presentation for the sake of maybe making the airline, us remember that airlines weren't so bad before COVID, is JetBlue. So here's an example of a person who reached the terminal where JetBlue was taking off with no Starbucks available. What they mentioned to them was, so JetBlue responds on the tweet and says that you can get an all-you-can-drink Dunkin' Donuts coffee on board. And I think that's such a small, gesture from the JetBlue team working on the social media. But I think it's so important for us to feel like our customers, when speaking to us, that they're responded to. So that's why I was mentioning earlier that when you talk about available resources, try and think about the fact that your customer wants to talk to you and that you need to be available for them in case they need anything. This is a beautiful example of how you can do it right. Now, what I'm going to take you to next is examples of how you can do it very, very wrong. So I'm not going to mention what is this company, and I'm sure many of you, if you actually found out the name, you would 100,000% agree with me. They are a bank in the UAE, one of the biggest, and they have one of the worst, I would say, customer service experiences I have ever personally had, all the way from the phone, all the way to actually, I would say probably their retail, the actual facility, when you go see them and you talk to them, they're much better. But when you try to call them on the phone, they take you on an endless journey that you feel will never, ever end. And you don't know at the end of that conversation if the phone will randomly close. Any guesses, feel free to drop it in the chat. Now, why are they one of the worst companies, I would say, in terms of customer service? This is very insulting to go online, type in the name of the company and Trustpilot, which is this website that comes up quite high on Google, saying that they had received a review, this company, for a 1.3 star rating, which means that, and horrible to say this, 92% of 290 reviews mentioned, I can't say if it's the right company or not, but 92% of 290 reviews mentioned that actually their customer service was absolutely abysmal. And if you go into the comments and you actually read how bad it is, it's almost like, why would I ever sign up with this bank? Like, you guys are absolutely horrible. So I think it's very interesting to also see that zero moment of truth would deter customers from signing up with that bank, but also as a person who's signed up for that bank, maybe even reconsidering leaving in case, if there was, they say that's the straw that broke the camel's back. I think if you have so many bad reviews and you have such bad customer service, it takes so little to convince your customer that they should leave. So I think that's something that we can really learn from. Try and make sure that when people are reviewing you, and I think some restaurants, like one of my favorite in the world in Bali, I was leaving this tiny hole in the wall. It turned out it was like the person's house who was like offering foods to people. They were a restaurant, begged us to go on TripAdvisor and do a nice review for them. So I think there's so many ways for us to encourage good behavior as well from customers. A lot of the time we're like, oh, people are unfair. They went and did a bad review. Yes, but if you were closer to your customer and you heard what they needed you to hear earlier, then maybe they wouldn't go on every single page on social media and try and destroy your company. So try and be faster than your customer and assume sometimes the worst can happen. So those are two examples of good and bad of customer service, and just showing you again online what people can do to your company. So just to be very, very cautious of that. There are two books that I wanted to recommend before getting to the last few slides that can really help you change your perspective on customer service. The first one, if you haven't read it, is called Atomic Habits: Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results. Now, I think based on reading this book, one thing that I can really understand and relate to is this idea that you don't have to change everything within your company. You just need to reprioritize where things sit, because it's a trickle-down effect. If you prioritize something often enough, you change those habits, over time you're going to see those results. It's about being diligent, being persistent, and making sure that you really are aligned with creating those changes. The second one, and one of honestly incredible book, trying to understand how Jeff Bezos thinks, right? And for those who haven't read this book, The Everything Store is absolutely brilliant. What I would definitely say in terms of both books is, you know, trying to understand why the customer comes first and how to do it efficiently and to the best of your ability. There's a beautiful example of Jeff giving a phone call to one of the customer service team. And what he only did on this call, and it was a very simple thing, is he just waited to see at what point the customer service representative picked up the phone. And once they did, they responded, "Hi, how can I help you?" And he said, "No, you've helped me enough." And he closes the phone. So I think something that we're really trying to understand about, you know, how customer service works, it's really about making sure that you do the things that you need to do them well. And I'll mention what they are in a few slides. But I think something that we should not underestimate is being the best at customer service, no matter how we can do it. So this is what I was mentioning in terms of what Jeff did. So when he called the customer service representative, there are basic things that we call the nothing service. What the nothing service actually means is not that it's nothing. It means that it is the basic elements that you have to do for your customer. So, you know, your customers want you to understand their needs. They expect you to have multiple options when contacting you. They need you to respond quickly. They crave a personalized experience. They want you to solve their problems. They prefer saving time over money. And finally, they want you to give them consistent answers. These are called a nothing service for a reason, because they do not do anything different than any other brand. But what you don't want to be is an anything brand. You want to be the best brand that differentiates itself from the competition. Take a look at why Careem again surpassed Uber, because Careem gave customers what they wanted. They listened to their users. They understood what's important to them. They want to delight the customer every single time. So I think it's so important for us to understand that, be a brand that offers the nothing service and a lot more. Which brings me to a beautiful TEDx that I will also share with Iffy so he can share with the audience here, by Darren Ross. So it's a TEDx called the Popsicle Popsicle feature, something like that. I can't remember the exact name. But what Darren says, which I absolutely adore, is listen carefully, respond creatively. So I think here we can really take away something that he shared as an example. He shared an example of how he went and visited a hotel in Miami that he remembered for the rest of his life. So he walks into the hotel, and the person who's standing behind the desk, behind the reception, walks around, takes both his hands, places them behind his back, leans forward and says, "It's a pleasure to have us with you today. Have you with us today." So something that he mentioned was this high touch moment, accompanied by a glass of, he mentioned sparkling water, which he gave to the customer. He said that that was a moment that he always remembered, because that type of delight, that type of ability to really cheer up your customer, make them feel good once they enter, is something that the customer will remember forever. So it's always that feeling that they got away with more, or they felt like they did something wrong from how good the service was. That feeling in your stomach that makes you feel like a little kid again. So what he was saying is, don't just offer the nothing service. Respond creatively. Be better than your competition. Offer something that is so unique that nobody else can get. So in his own hotel, Darren mentions that he gives away these popsicles to all the customers who are sitting by the pool. You just have to pick up a red phone and a popsicle comes to you. So I think this is something that's super important and super beautiful for us to learn from, is that customer service is more than just doing the needful. It's also about doing the creative element to really win over your customer. And I think I'll finalize by just mentioning as well, for those of you who are also looking to add, let's say, a customer service software to your platform or to your website or whatever it is, here's a few that I've basically gone out and looked for that can really be, let's say, a way to help you talk to your customer better. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm going to jump into Q&A. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to help you with the Q&A.
Yeah.
We've already got 2 questions waiting for you.
Okay, wonderful.
So one question comes from Maria. She says, the interesting thing I have found is that your customers still talk about you on platforms where you don't have a presence. Twitter, for example, this week, Emirates NBD was horrible. And I did a search on Twitter and there were so many random negative comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So this is something that, as we mentioned earlier, and thank you, Maria, for your question. You know, when I mentioned earlier about being close to your customer and trying to get them to answer or do something faster than you, right? So it really is about making sure that your customer is not going to go ahead of you and push negative comments out. So I'm sure, Nihal, you'll also agree with me on this one, but Emirates NBD, when we call, who picks up the phone?
The bots.
The bot. Wonderful. Ava, right?
Yeah.
In your perspective, the panelists, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, Ava picks up the phone, right? But how many of you here, and I'd love for the panelists to also agree or disagree with me, but how many of you have felt delighted by Ava or felt she's helped you with your questions? So let's see how many people. Never. Okay. Not at all. Never. Okay, great. It's funny. We're actually having this conversation now, and nobody at Emirates NBD is actually watching this. Now, when okay, so but I will give it back to them as a credit. But have you ever been to their retail facility and waited in line to speak to somebody? So for those of you who've also gone to the actual, physical facility and try to talk to an Emirates NBD representative, can I get maybe a yes if you have done that? Haven't. Okay. Anyone else? Credit card, haven't. Okay. So why am I bringing this up? So actually, one thing that I will definitely agree, so sometimes it takes a long time to reach a representative. So maybe we should go and consult Emirates NBD after this call. But something that I think we can definitely learn from is that, customers are actually, they try their best to help you as well. So they will call you, they will email you, they will give you some of their patience first before destroying your brand on social media. So I think what happens a lot of the time is that a brand like Emirates NBD doesn't spend enough quality time with their customers. They don't give them that FaceTime after they set up their account. So I think this is really about embedding customer service at every touch point of the business that brands like Emirates NBD miss out on. So this is something that I can definitely say. I agree with you. It doesn't, you can't replace what people are going to say on Twitter, but you can always try and be faster than your customer by being present at the right moments. So for example, if I have a show of hands for people who want to remove Ava, I'm pretty sure that I would have a lot of people respond that, yes, we would love to remove Ava because she's absolutely useless, right? So I think something that we will all agree with is a lot of the times brands become very complacent and they think that they are reducing their time by putting a filter between you and them. That type of bot is more harmful to the brand than less. So sometimes it's really about changing your dynamics to support your customer better. So testing out things, and I think the entrepreneurs, SMEs in the room will definitely agree. If you change your strategy slowly and you try to understand what your customer wants by asking them at the get-go, is this helpful for you with a small sample group? You would be able to understand that first in a lean approach before investing on changing your entire call center into an AVA. So I think that's one thing that we can definitely learn from the situation. Let's look at our next question.
So another question comes from an anonymous attendee.
Yes.
They ask, is there a difference between B2B and B2C customer service?
Yes, 100%, absolutely. So if we take an example of, I mentioned earlier IDEMIA, who have the biometrics. So we saw the beautiful lady standing at the airport, and she's staring at the biometrics that's screening her face, while the controller is actually taking a look at her passport. What we have here is a situation where, you know, that biometrics was bought by the airport or whoever kind of facilitated that deal, and the customer is now facing it. So in that situation, you would be surprised to think a little bit about this one. But yes, we sold it to the airport, which was the B2B. But there is also that B2C element where the customer has to interact directly with that machine. Now, when it comes to IDEMIA selling that product to the airport as well, it also is about offering, I wouldn't say that customer service is also very restricted to somebody who just picks up the phone or receives a request. Sometimes it's also about the person, the salesperson who is going to Dubai airports and selling that product. So I think it's really important for us to also realize that at the same time, we want to make sure that however we're communicating with our customer, that we are constantly iterating. And that's what salespeople do. They iterate how they're going to be providing that product better to the customer. So as Dubai airports, for example, I want to make sure that let's say the width of that machine is only, let's say, 15 centimeters on the ground. That would be like the actual width of it, because I don't have enough space for my customer to go around it. So what the IDEMIA would do is they would customize that entire machine for the airport before mass producing it for them. So we try to think a little bit around what customers want and how we can satisfy them by asking the right questions first. So customer service is always about identifying and then iterating as we go.
All right.
I hope that answers your question.
So
how can, yeah, please.
You want to read it?
Nope, you go for it.
So the next question comes from Ayman Ansari. He asks how to be better on calls when it comes to CS, customer service.
Great. Perfect. So I think when it comes to being better on calls, so when we talk about the customer call service center, right? So you have certain requests that are coming in. Now, a lot of the time when we talk about Zendesk or other software that track the person who's calling in, what we try to do very quickly is identify whether we know who this person is. If it's a number that we've seen before has been registered in our system, we need to make sure that the ticket matches the number that's calling in before the customer service representative picks up the phone. There's nothing more beautiful or sounds more like a symphony to a customer than their own name. I think this is something that we can really try to resonate with. If we can create that personalized emotion with the customer when they call in, we can guarantee that they have a better call output. So what we can really try and do first is try and identify the name of the person. If it's not already given to us because of that ticket, then we ask them at the first point. So that's the first thing. The second one is having a script, a starting line that we know is going to relax the customer, whether they're coming in with something good or bad, something that really tells them that we really appreciate the fact that they've given us a call today and we would love to know how to help them. Creating that first positive emotion with the customer will relax them. This person that's calling in needs help. You are going to help them. So that's how we can really deal with supporting a customer service call, by making sure that your intro is great and that your opening line is also great. So, yeah.
All right. Then he asks another question afterwards. He asks, how can brands be sensitive to their customers during COVID-19?
Yeah, so that's a great point. Let's split our business into two components, one being online and the second one being offline. So when we talk about online businesses, let's look at e-commerce as a focus point, right? So a lot of us know that during COVID-19 that we had a problem in terms of safety and security. Everybody was very worried about their health, right? Take an example of Amazon shipping packages to your house. I'm pretty sure everybody has like not a detergent, but like an alcohol bucket where when something comes in through the mail, that it kind of goes straight into that, or you spray it really quickly, you wash it as much as you can to remove the germs from the exterior of the packaging. So a lot of what was happening is, forget the moment when you even get the actual item from the person who's delivering it to you. This contactless moment where the customer, right, doesn't want to have any contact at all with the person who's dropping off the package, doesn't want to sign anything, doesn't want to hold a pen, doesn't want to do any of that, right? So what customer service had to do and had to adapt to is, how do we give this box contactless without having to make the person sign anything, right? So this was a very important component, making sure that they also wore masks, making sure that the delivery point is much more seamless and much more to the standards of the customer. So that, I would say, on the online side, when you're ordering, there's still a moment where you have to touch the customer. So you still need to deliver that package to their door. So there had to be a lot of different adjustments during that point, and also follow-ups with phone calls or emails to say that your order has been received. The second one I would say is the actual in-store experience. So a lot of us know that, you know, when it comes to putting on makeup, let's say you walk into a Sephora, it's that moment where the person who's actually going to be giving you the makeup wants to touch your hand, wants to make sure that your skin, do you have an oily T-zone? They want to make sure that they can understand your face. Now, can you imagine what's happening during COVID? Is that a lot of people don't want to be 2 meters in distance from you, right? So what happened in the retail industry is a lot of things suffered heavily. So how did we actually try and adapt a situation where the customer service representatives within the stores are able to move within the comfort level of the customer, right? So standing further away while the customer is doing something, trying to speak through the mask, trying to be a little bit more in terms of body language forward towards the customer. So it's a lot of different adaptations that we had to do to recognize what will make my customer comfortable. And I think this is always a method of understanding and learning the body language of your customer to be able to adapt to that. So in both situations, we have to really understand that at the end, it's all about what the customer is saying makes them feel comfortable, and then acting accordingly. So the more information we can get from them beforehand, the better we can act afterwards.
All right.
So I hope that is it.
And then if he says, he asks, how can you turn a bad customer service moment to a good one?
That's a great point. So there's a very big company here in the UAE who my friends actually are, they work with this company. And something that happened is, one customer had a bad experience, went on social media, on every single Facebook group page across the UAE, and just went, let's say, and posted one of the most horrible comments and in and every single one of these social media groups. So the CEO stepped in and personally called the customer. So the first thing that they did is they profusely apologized for their experience. That was the first thing that they do. And then they listened to the customer. So they let the customer express all of the negativity that they had. And the customer basically, again, threatened the CEO and said, you know, I'm going to make sure your business goes to dust. Like, you guys have horrible service, etc. And what the CEO basically did is apologize once again, and then mentioned that they would be making a voucher code under the customer's name for the next 5 bookings to be completely free for them. So what they did is they said, you know, we're going to be doing this just for you because we believe that you are a wonderful customer and that we don't want you to feel like the service went bad, right? So what the customer then did, took a step back, they gave the person a few days, they messaged them, the CEO messaged them again over email and said, thank you so much again for the time. We really look forward to you coming back and using the voucher codes whenever you feel ready. What the customer did, went onto all the Facebook groups, deleted every single message that they posted. Now, there is only so much you can do, right, as well. Sometimes customers will not help you and they'll walk away and say, you know, this was the worst customer service and I want to teach you a lesson, and they will never let that grudge go. But you can always be a good person and try and reach out to them to make sure that they feel that, you know what, this brand doesn't need to suffer because of this situation. They're trying to help me out in return. So I think there's something to really learn here, is that if your customer is going out on an abusive rant, be 10 times better than them. Be 10 times more kareem than them, because that's what's really going to count at the end of the day. And that's what your customer is going to remember.
True. And then the last question we have is from Tamara. She asks, what do you recommend a startup that operates from home to do for customer service?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a loaded question as well. So two things are happening here from what I can read is that you are a startup, and the second one is customer service. Now, as a startup, we all know that you're still building a brand, you're still building your way up. So something that I would definitely say is that customer service should be managed by you to start, as much as you can. So try and be involved in every part while you are working from home. Two things are very important in customer service, which I personally find when I'm on the receiving end. The first one is being in a place where you feel like you can give the most attention to your customer. That's the one thing. This includes a few elements. The first one being silence, being in a room where this person can actually hear you clearly. You know, so if you're sitting in a room where everything is loud, there's kids screaming, etc., this is not the most comfortable environment for the customer who's listening to you. The second one is also, as I mentioned earlier, trying to tag the customer to a ticket where you can identify their name. So try and make sure that you really get close to the customer to understand and evaluate what needs they have. So first starting off by asking their name and then proceeding to say, thank you for giving us a call. And we'd love to see how we can support you further today. So I would definitely say, if it's not just you, but a few other people that are managing the customer service, ensure that there is a, let's say, a similar narrative being pushed out by each customer service to start. That consistency in language across the brand is very important in terms of the reputation of the company. So that's one thing I would definitely recommend to you, Tamara.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was one of the last questions.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Great.
So thank you so much. So much. Thank you for your time. And I really enjoyed the webinar. I hope all our attendees did as well. And thank you to our attendees also for joining. You've got some comments. Some are saying you are the best. They're also thanking you.
Thank you, guys. No, really, it's, I mean, it's an honor to have, I mean, we had around 18 people on the call today. So I'm honestly really happy to have been here and to be a part of the Emirati National Day for this webinar series. So thank you so much. And anybody who needs anything extra, message me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect and answer any more of your questions.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so again. And you can also book our speaker on info@mina-speakers.com. If you liked her and you want to post her in any of your events, you can book her through that email. Or another email that's sales@mina-speakers.com. So thank you everyone once again, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye-bye.